They say Easter is about renewal, about family gathering under one roof, breaking bread, sharing laughs, maybe even healing old wounds. But for me, Easter's always felt like walking into a courtroom where I'm on trial for crimes I didn't commit. Only the jury's already decided I'm guilty. My name's Daniel, I'm 32, and if you ask my family, I'm the black sheep. Not because I did anything wrong, just because I stopped letting them control me. It started with small things. My Aunt Carol, she's the ringleader, used to give me backhanded compliments growing up. "Oh, Daniel, you're so creative. Too bad it doesn't pay the bills." Or, "You're such a dreamer." Reminds me of your dad before he ran off. Every year, she hosts Easter brunch at her over-decorated house with those tacky floral arrangements and way too many deviled eggs. The entire family flocks in like moths to a chandelier. Cousins, uncles, people I only ever see at funerals or food-heavy holidays. I almost skipped it this year. I stood in my apartment that morning, holding the invitation, wondering if I should just go for a hike instead. But then I thought about my cousin Emily. She's the only one who ever treated me like a real person. When we were kids, we used to sneak jelly beans into the attic and play cards while the adults gossiped downstairs. So I told myself I'd go for her, and maybe, just maybe, things would be different. I arrived fashionably 10 minutes late, as a defensive maneuver more than anything. Aunt Carol greeted me at the door with her usual tight-lipped smile, like she was pretending I hadn't ruined her day just by showing up. "Daniel," she said, air kissing the side of my face. "Didn't expect you to make it. Thought you'd be busy with one of your projects." "Nice to see you too, Carol," I replied, letting her subtle jab roll off my shoulders. The dining room looked like an Instagram nightmare. Pastel everything, bunny-shaped napkin holders, and those sugar-coated marshmallow chicks staring into your soul. I spotted Emily near the window and made a beeline for her. She gave me a real hug, tight, warm, genuine, and whispered, "Brace yourself. They're in rare form today." Halfway through the meal, I found out what she meant. We'd just finished passing around the glazed ham when Aunt Carol stood up, tapped her crystal glass with a spoon, and said with theatrical cheer, "Family, I have a little announcement." I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when she told everyone she was finally retiring from her position as vice principal, even though everyone knew the school board had nudged her out. The room quieted, some chuckles rippling from the younger cousins who thought they were in for a fun surprise. "We took a vote," she said, pausing like she was delivering a punchline. "And you're out of the will, Daniel." Laughter, not from everyone, but enough that I felt that warm flush crawl up my neck. I looked around. Uncle Greg was smirking into his mimosa. My cousin Jake tried to hide his snort with a napkin. Even my own mother gave a forced laugh, the kind that said, "Don't make a scene." I caught Emily's eye. Her smile had vanished. She looked like she wanted to throw her water glass. I felt the old familiar cocktail of emotions surge up. Humiliation, anger, that hollow ache in your chest when you realize your presence is more of a punchline than a welcome. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't play it off or look away. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick white envelope, and said, calm and clear, "Good thing I brought my own." The laughter stopped. Just like that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. I just slid the envelope across the table toward Emily, who looked at me with wide, confused eyes. She opened it slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. I watched her face change in real time. Confusion, then disbelief, then something deeper. Her lip quivered, and then, without warning, she burst into tears. Aunt Carol's face went pale. "Emily," she asked, her voice suddenly shrill. "What is it? What did he give you?" Emily couldn't speak. She just turned the papers toward her mom. Aunt Carol leaned over, read one line, and staggered back like she'd been slapped. Her hand gripped the edge of the table for support. That's when the murmurs started. Chairs scraped. Heads turned. My Uncle Greg leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse. My mother looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Jake actually dropped his fork, and I just sat there, calm, quiet, watching the cracks form in the smug facade that had stood unchallenged my entire life. I didn't need to say anything. Not yet. I just let the silence do the talking. And then Aunt Carol looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "You didn't." I smiled. The same kind of smile she gave me every Easter. Tight, controlled, polite. And I said, "Oh, I did." Her hand went to her chest like she was feeling for her pearls. Except this time, there were none. Just her manicured nails tapping against the neckline of her floral blouse, searching for control. Her face, once powdered into perfection, was now drained of color, and for once in my life, Aunt Carol had nothing to say. Emily looked up at me, mascara starting to run. "Is this real?" she asked softly. I nodded. Every word. That's when the room began to shift. You could feel it, the silence rippling into unease. Cousin Jake leaned toward Greg and whispered something under his breath. My mom's jaw clenched tight like she was doing math in her head. Only Emily kept her eyes on me, wide with disbelief and something else. Relief, maybe, or guilt. See, a few months ago, something changed. My grandfather, Carol's father, had called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years. He was 89, sharp as ever, and apparently in possession of a lot more money than people realized. He said he wanted to talk before the vultures start circling. I didn't expect much. Probably a guilt trip, maybe a lecture about family. But instead, he surprised me. "I've watched how they treat you," he said, "and I've kept quiet long enough. They think the inheritance is theirs by birthright, not by character. But you show up, even when they mock you, even when they don't deserve your kindness." I almost didn't believe him. But then he handed me a folder with legal documents and said, "I want you to decide where it goes when I'm gone." It was power, not just money, not just some old man's revenge fantasy. It was trust. He made me executor of the entire estate. Every cent, every property, every trust fund. And he'd already rewritten his will to reflect it. "Do what's fair," he said, "not what's expected." I hadn't told anyone. Not until now. Not until Aunt Carol decided to turn brunch into her personal roast. So that envelope? It wasn't just some dramatic flair. It was a photocopy of the will. Signed. Stamped. Legal. Emily had read the clause that mattered most. The one that confirmed I held the power to distribute everything. And that Aunt Carol, along with Greg, Jake, and a few others who had treated the rest of us like dirt for years, were explicitly removed from consideration based on their conduct. I didn't write the language. Grandpa did. But I wasn't going to argue with his honesty. Carol finally found her voice. "This is a joke. It's not legal. You forged this. This is fraud." "Nope," Emily said, wiping her eyes. "That's Uncle Robert's signature. I recognize it. I saw it 100 times growing up." "She's lying." Carol snapped. But Emily stood up, voice steady now. "You lied, Aunt Carol. For years. You made all of us believe we had no choice but to put up with your passive-aggressive garbage. You made Daniel the family punching bag just because he didn't grovel at your feet. And now you're shocked he's the one Grandpa trusted?" A murmur of agreement rolled through the table. I saw my cousin Sam, quiet, awkward Sam, nod. Even Uncle Greg looked unsure now, like he didn't know whose side to take. "You think you can just waltz in and take what's ours?" Carol hissed at me. "I'm not taking anything," I said, finally standing. "I'm honoring his wishes. And right now, I'm just letting you all know where you stand. You wanted me out of your will. Well, turns out, I'm the one holding the pen." Boom. The line landed like thunder. You could practically hear jaws hitting the floor. One of the younger cousins let out a nervous laugh, quickly silenced by his mom. My mother looked like she might pass out. Carol's hands trembled now. "This isn't over," she muttered. "Oh, I know," I said, slipping the envelope back into my bag. "I expect you'll make plenty of noise about it. But this is the part you never understood. Carol, money doesn't make you powerful. Character does. And for once in your life, you're going to learn what it feels like to be powerless." I turned to Emily and gestured toward the hallway. "You want to take a walk? Get some air." She nodded, still stunned, but grateful. We left the dining room as the chaos began to swirl behind us. Raised voices, half-started arguments, a family finally cracking at the seams. The sun outside was warm. The grass smelled like spring. Emily took a breath and said, "You're going to change everything, aren't you?" I looked ahead, not needing to think. "I'm going to make things right." We walked for a while, just down the street, neither of us saying much. Emily clutched the envelope like it was a life raft, and I let her. She needed to hold on to something real. Something that wasn't fake smiles, backhanded compliments, and plastic tablecloths under crystal vases. The air felt different out there, cooler, less suffocating. We could still hear faint shouting coming from the house, but I didn't look back. I'd done enough looking back in my life. Finally, she spoke. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shrugged. I didn't want to drag you into it unless I had to. But you've always been decent to me, Em. I remember who used to slip me cookies when Carol made me sit at the kids' table, even when I was 25. She smiled weakly. You were always too forgiving. Not anymore, I said. I spent too many years being the embarrassment of the family. The one they pitted, laughed at, excluded. All because I didn't go the path they expected. They never saw the late nights, the freelance gigs, the tiny wins that eventually added up to something. Emily turned to me, brows furrowed. What are you going to do with it? The estate. That was the question, wasn't it? Grandpa hadn't given me any strict instructions, just a moral compass and a whole lot of faith. I'd thought about it every day since he handed me those documents. And I'd come to one conclusion. I'm going to divide it fairly, I said. Not equally, fairly. The ones who treated people with dignity will be rewarded. The ones who didn't? They'll get exactly what they gave. Emily exhaled, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. They're going to hate you. They already do, I said. At least now they have a reason. We stopped by a small bench outside the neighborhood park, one we used to visit when we were kids. The wooden slats creaked as we sat down, and for a moment it almost felt like we were 10 again, giggling behind the bushes, hiding from Carol's shrill voice demanding we come inside for picture time. Emily reached over and touched my arm. I'm glad you're the one who got it. Grandpa always said you were the only one in this family who understood people. I stared at her for a beat. You think they'll come after me? Oh, they're already planning it, she said with a small laugh. I give it an hour before Aunt Carol's got her lawyer on the phone. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and showed her a name and number at the top. Eli Goodman, estate attorney. Emily blinked. You've already? Had everything notarized, witnessed, verified. Grandpa insisted. Said the moment the will was read, they'd try to claw their way back in. She whistled low. You're 5 steps ahead. I had to be, I said. They've been playing this game for decades. I just finally learned the rules. Just then, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw a message from my mother. Mom, can we talk? Please call me when you're alone. I stared at it for a few seconds, heart heavy but no longer conflicted. I didn't respond. I should get back in there, Emily said, though she didn't sound thrilled about it. They're going to want answers. Let them guess for a while, I said, standing up. They've never liked being in the dark. Now they'll know how it feels. We started walking back, slowly. When we reached the house again, it looked like a war zone in disguise. Half the family had left already. Greg's car was gone, and so was Jake's. I spotted Carol through the living room window, pacing with a phone to her ear, talking fast and angry. Her voice carried even through the glass. Emily gave me a look. You sure about this? I smiled. No, but that's never stopped me before. As we stepped back onto the porch, the front door swung open. It was my mother. She looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually tired, like the weight of pretending had finally caught up to her. Daniel, she said, we need to talk. I studied her face. For once, she wasn't playing diplomat. She wasn't smiling politely to keep the peace. She looked like someone who'd finally realized peace built on silence wasn't peace at all. I nodded. All right, but this time I talked first. She stepped aside and let me in. I walked through that familiar hallway, past the framed photos where I barely existed, and into the dining room, where the table was now empty and cold. Aunt Carol was still on the phone in the corner, but when she saw me, she stopped mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open, and for the first time in my life, she looked afraid. I sat at the head of the table. My seat now. Emily sat beside me, and the room waited, because what I was about to say would change everything. I took a moment to look around that room. Really look. The chipped molding by the baseboard. The crooked painting of lilies Aunt Carol insisted was original. The glimmering chandelier that never quite lit up the corners. This wasn't just a house filled with furniture and passive-aggressive centerpieces. It was a stage where they'd all rehearsed their roles for decades. The golden child, the bitter matriarch, the invisible cousin, and me, the family disappointment. Only now, the script had flipped, and they didn't have a single line prepared. Aunt Carol stood frozen by the window, phone still clutched in her hand, jaw tightening as I leaned forward and finally spoke. I'm not here to beg for a spot at your table anymore. I'm here to clean it. My mother took a step forward. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Daniel, we didn't know. No, Mom, I cut in. You did know. You just didn't care enough to stop it. Every Easter, Every birthday, every family event. You watched them humiliate me, ignore me, and write me off. And you let it happen because keeping the peace was easier than protecting your son. She winced like the words hit harder than she expected. But I didn't say them to hurt her. I said them because someone had to. I didn't want any of this, I continued. I didn't ask Grandpa to give me control. I didn't come here to throw it in your faces. But when he looked at this family and asked himself who actually earned the right to decide its future, he didn't choose the ones who smiled the loudest or hosted the fanciest brunch. Aunt Carol finally snapped out of her daze. You're not going to get away with this. You think you can just cut us out? We are family. Family. I repeated. Family doesn't vote someone out of a will and laugh about it like it's a party game. Family doesn't mock, belittle, or exclude. If you think blood entitles you to someone else's legacy, then you've already lost. Her face twisted. I gave my life to this family. No, I said, calm and clear. You gave your life to controlling it. And now it's over. I reached into my bag and pulled out the second envelope. This one wasn't just a copy of the will. It was a packet of formal notifications, prepared with my lawyer's help, for each disinherited family member. I placed it on the table. Every one of you will receive a letter this week. Grandpa's assets will be divided in accordance with his instructions. Some of you won't be receiving anything. Others will, but with stipulations. Contributions to charity. Education trusts. Things that actually matter. I turned to Emily. You'll be handling the scholarship fund. Her eyes went wide. Wait, what? You were always the one person who tried to lift others up. Grandpa saw it. I did too. You deserve to be part of the change. She blinked fast, and I saw tears welling up again. Only this time, they were from something deeper: respect, gratitude, maybe even hope. You can't do this, Aunt Carol growled, stepping forward. This is my house. Not anymore, I said, standing. Grandpa transferred the deed 3 weeks before he passed. He wanted me to use it to do something good. Maybe open a community center, maybe sell it and fund the trust. Either way, you'll need to find a new place to host Easter brunch. Carol's hands were shaking now. You ungrateful little. My mom finally spoke, quietly but firmly. Carol, stop. Carol froze. My mother walked toward me, slow but sure, and did something she hadn't done since I was a teenager. She stood beside me. I should have stood up for him a long time ago, she said. But I won't stay silent anymore. Daniel's right. You can't build a family on fear and manipulation. Carol stared at her like she'd been slapped. You're taking his side? No, my mom said. I'm finally choosing a side. I could have cried, but I didn't. I just nodded, silently acknowledging the weight of that moment. The rest of the brunch unraveled fast. Those who were loyal to Carol shuffled out quickly, some in silence, others throwing last-minute digs that landed like wet tissue paper. A few cousins, like Sam and Emily, lingered. We sat together in the living room, eating leftover carrot cake and talking about plans. Not revenge, not control, just ideas for something better. A few weeks later, I sold the house and donated half the proceeds to start the Robert Ellis Foundation, named after my grandfather. It supports scholarships for first-generation college students and provides small business grants to people who've been told they don't fit the mold. Emily runs it with me now. Carol tried to contest the will, of course, but the documents were airtight. Her lawyer eventually stopped returning her calls. As for my mom, she visits often now. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Sometimes healing looks like hard conversations over lukewarm coffee, but at least it's real. This year, Easter looked different. We hosted it in a rented hall, surrounded by laughter that didn't come with a side of judgment. People brought their own dishes, and nobody tapped a glass to deliver a speech about who mattered more. I sat at the head of the table again, but not because I demanded it, because they wanted me there. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like family. My name's Eli, I'm 29, and I guess you could say I've always been the stable one in the family. The reliable one. The one who doesn't cause drama, who sends birthday cards on time, who picks up when someone calls at 2 a.m. It's a role I didn't exactly volunteer for, but I learned pretty early on that if I didn't hold the line, no one would. My parents, nice enough on the outside, have always had this uncanny ability to decide things for me, usually under the guise of family unity or what's best for everyone. My younger sister, Cassie, on the other hand, was the whirlwind. The kind of person who could fail 3 college courses, borrow money from everyone in the family, and still get a standing ovation for showing up to dinner with new hair. That's not bitterness talking. It's just how things have always been. The real turning point started at what should have been an ordinary family brunch. You know the kind, bland eggs, too many mimosas, and the same 5 stories that get recycled like clockwork. We were all crammed around the patio table at my parents' place. Me, Cassie, our mom and dad, and Aunt Lila, who never says much but always seems to know everything. I had barely touched my plate when Mom said, with her usual cheery tone, "We're just so relieved Cassie will be staying with Eli for a while. It'll give her some breathing room to get back on her feet." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Cassie chimed in like it was old news. "Yeah, I'll just take the spare room. I figure I can start moving my stuff next weekend." There wasn't a question mark at the end of her voice, not really. Just the kind of entitled assumption I'd heard my whole life. No one had asked me. Not once. They just said it like I wasn't even sitting there. "Right?" Dad added, like some kind of punctuation. "She needs a fresh start, and it's not like you use that space for anything important. Besides, family sticks together." I just nodded slowly, chewing a dry piece of toast, trying not to let my face betray anything. My heart was pounding, not in anger, but in that quiet, heavy way that tells you a line just got crossed. I didn't say a word. I just let them keep talking. They were so confident, so comfortable assuming my time, my space, my life, that they didn't even pause to check if I was on board. They didn't notice that I didn't confirm it. They didn't ask when I'd be home. They didn't even look at me. Cassie was already pulling up Pinterest boards for how she'd decorate the room. What they didn't know was that I'd moved out of that apartment 3 weeks earlier. Not on a whim, either. I'd been planning it for months. The lease had ended, and I took the chance to grab a smaller place across town, closer to work, with more light, no roommates, no baggage. And I never told my parents. Part of me just wanted something for me. A space that was mine alone, that didn't come with the weight of expectation or family deals. I still had the old lease in my name for another week since I paid through the month, but I hadn't stepped foot in there since I carried out the last box. Sitting there, listening to them carve up my life like it was a pie they were entitled to split, I realized something. They genuinely believed they had the right to decide where my boundaries were. They thought my silence was agreement. They thought they could just assign me responsibilities like a side character in their story. I remember excusing myself from brunch early, saying I had errands to run. Mom barely looked up. Cassie waved absently, already texting. I walked to my car in a daze, sat in the driver's seat for a few long minutes, and let the stillness settle around me. No music, no calls, just breathing. That quiet clarity that only shows up when something inside you snaps, not in rage, but in resolve. That week, I didn't reach out. I didn't remind anyone that I didn't live there anymore. I didn't correct them when Mom texted me a grocery list for Cassie's arrival or when Dad sent a thumbs-up emoji in response to some article about teaching responsibility to adult children. I didn't say anything when Cassie asked if she could bring over a cat, just for a few weeks. I just watched it unfold. Every message was a reminder that they weren't asking. They were informing. And that made what came next feel inevitable. The day she was supposed to move in, a Saturday, I drove by the old apartment around noon, just to see. The street was crowded. Cassie's little white car was double parked, its trunk open, boxes stacked on the sidewalk. She stood there holding a plastic container of what looked like makeup or jewelry, her phone pressed to her ear. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving. The scene burned into my mind. Later, I checked the security camera feed from the building's shared entrance. Yes, I still had login access. The motion sensor had picked her up ringing the buzzer. Again. And again. She knocked. She paced. She sat on her suitcase. She called, first me, then Mom, then probably half the family. I didn't answer. I turned my phone off and went out for coffee. That evening, I checked again. The boxes were gone. So was Cassie. The last footage was of her being picked up by someone. Maybe a friend. Maybe Dad. I didn't care. I just sat there, sipping my drink, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't guilt. It wasn't satisfaction, either. It was quiet. Like I'd finally stepped out of a role I didn't audition for. But that wasn't the end. By Monday, my inbox was flooded. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that started off passive-aggressive and quickly became just plain aggressive. Mom texted, "Eli, this isn't funny. Cassie is extremely upset and confused. You need to call me back." Dad texted, "You made your sister wait in the cold? You better have a good explanation." Cassie texted, "What is wrong with you?" I stood outside for an hour like a fool. "You couldn't even send a text? What kind of brother does that?" I didn't reply. Not yet. I was still sitting with it. This strange, quiet storm that had been building inside me for years. It wasn't just about Cassie or the spare room. It was about every time they had made a decision with my name attached to it, like I was some resource they could allocate. Babysitting duties, loan cosigns, family errands, emergency help, and me, always the good soldier. That week at work, I was unusually calm, productive, even. Like I had finally unplugged from a current that had been draining me dry. But every day, the messages kept coming, some demanding, others manipulative. Tuesday, Mom left a voicemail in tears. "I just don't understand why you're doing this. Cassie needed you. You know how hard things have been for her lately." Wednesday, Cassie sent a screenshot of her trying to book a hotel. "Guess I'll just spend the rent money on this then, since some people can't be bothered to answer their phones." Thursday, a long message from Dad, the kind that pretends to be calm but drips with judgment. "You've always been the responsible one. That's why we trusted you with this. Honestly, I expected more from you." That last one hit harder than I wanted it to. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a utility, a dependable cog in the family machine. So I did what any responsible one would do. I started documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every dollar I had spent in the last 2 years helping out with family stuff, covering Cassie's overdraft fees, helping Mom and Dad with car repairs, chipping in for groceries until payday. I made a spreadsheet, line by line. It was exhausting and cathartic, because for the first time, I was treating their chaos like a problem to be solved. That Friday, I sent an email. One single, polite, impossibly formal email. I CC'd Mom, Dad, and Cassie. The subject line? Cassie's living situation. The body of the email read, "Hello, just to clarify, I moved out of the previous apartment on April 3rd. The lease officially ends on April 30th, but I have no belongings there and no intention of returning. It is not my legal residence, and I am not responsible for guests attempting to access it. In the past 2 years, I've contributed financially to various family matters. For full transparency, I've included a breakdown of those contributions below. Please review at your convenience. Going forward, I will no longer be able to assist with unplanned housing arrangements or emergency funding. I recommend coordinating these matters with more advance notice. Best, Eli." And I attached the spreadsheet. The silence that followed was glorious. No calls that night. No texts the next day. Not even a passive-aggressive meme from Aunt Lila. It was like I had finally spoken a language they didn't understand: boundaries. Not anger. Not sarcasm. Just clear, unemotional facts. But then came Sunday. That morning, I went to the grocery store like I always do. Same route, same little corner cafe for a cinnamon roll on the way back. My phone buzzed halfway through the line. "Cassie." Again. I muted it. Then it buzzed again, "Mom." Then again, "Dad." I stepped outside and finally opened the group message. A photo of my old apartment. Cassie was standing in front of it again. This time, she wasn't alone. Mom was there too, arms crossed. And Dad, looking annoyed, like he had something better to do. Below the photo, Cassie had written, "We're here. Open the door." My heart actually skipped. They were there. Again. Except this time, they didn't think I was avoiding them. They thought I was inside. 5 minutes later, another photo came in. A box on the ground, labeled toiletries. Then a message, "We'll wait." That's when I realized they were going to sit there. All afternoon if they had to. Maybe even longer. So I got in my car. I didn't head toward them. I didn't call. I drove to a quiet parking lot 2 blocks away, turned off the engine, and sat. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was deciding whether or not to say anything at all. The next hour changed everything. And it started when I saw my dad walking back toward the street, without Cassie or Mom, and picking up his phone. From the distance of my parked car, I watched Dad pace along the sidewalk, phone to his ear, his other hand gesturing in those short, sharp chops he always used when he was frustrated but pretending not to be. I rolled the window down just slightly, just enough to hear the murmur of his voice drifting through the spring breeze. I couldn't make out the words, but I could tell from his posture that this wasn't a calm check-in. This was the beginning of damage control. After a minute, he turned around and started walking back toward the building. Cassie was still there, sitting on one of the boxes, legs crossed, phone in her lap. scanning the sidewalk like she was expecting some divine intervention to descend from the sky. Mom stood stiffly beside her, arms folded so tight it looked like she was hugging herself. No one spoke. I wondered how long they had been like that, waiting, assuming I'd eventually appear to save the day like I always had. But I didn't move. I just sat there, parked behind a row of hedges, a few buildings down, watching the family dynamic unfold from the outside, literally and metaphorically. And it hit me how theatrical it all was. 3 grown adults staging a sit-in outside an apartment that didn't belong to any of us anymore, demanding I show up to make their problem go away. Around 2 p.m., a neighbor must have come out. I saw her from my angle, a woman in gym clothes walking her dog, pausing at the sight of the impromptu sidewalk standoff. She and my mom exchanged a few words. Cassie stood up quickly, trying to look composed. My dad, ever the gentleman when someone else was watching, even extended a hand toward the dog, trying to smile. The neighbor didn't linger. She just nodded and walked on. But 30 seconds later, Cassie was texting again. Everyone here thinks we're crazy. Just let us in already. And then, you're being cruel, Eli. Seriously, who does this to their family? I stared at the screen for a while, then opened a note on my phone. Not to reply, just to jot something down. A thought that hit me so clearly, I didn't want to lose it. They don't think you're a person. They think you're a service they forgot to tip. I sat with that for a while. Then, I opened my banking app, scrolled through the last dozen charges, and took note of the remaining auto payments still quietly draining from my account on their behalf. Subscriptions Cassie had asked me to temporarily cover. The shared Netflix tied to my email. The grocery card linked to mom's number. The insurance payment dad swore he'd reimburse me for in February. It wasn't about the money. It was about the pattern, the quiet entitlement. The way they painted themselves as the injured party the second I didn't fall in line. At 3:13 p.m., Cassie called again. I let it ring once before silencing it. Then another text buzzed in. You're gonna regret this. That one stuck with me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't in all caps. It didn't come with 20 angry emojis. But something about the way she phrased it, not, you're hurting me, but you're going to regret this, spoke volumes. It wasn't about being abandoned. It was about losing access to a room, a buffer, a backup plan. They weren't there because they missed me. They were there because I'd stopped being useful. I watched them for another 20 minutes before I saw Dad open the trunk of the car. One by one, the boxes went back in. Cassie didn't help. She stood on the sidewalk, arms dangling at her sides, face locked in a grimace that would have looked like heartbreak to anyone who didn't know better. Mom finally broke first, getting into the front seat without a word. Dad followed. Cassie lingered the longest, sending one final glance toward the building before she, too, climbed in. The car sat there for a full minute before pulling away. I didn't move. Not yet. When I finally drove home, my home, the new one, the one no one had ever visited, I walked in with the strange feeling of having watched my old life from the outside. The door closed with a soft click behind me, and I stood there in the silence. The air smelled like basil from the little plant I kept on the windowsill. The light spilled onto the hardwood floor. No boxes. No drama. No sister in the spare room. But the messages didn't stop. By Monday, I was getting texts from extended family. Aunt Lila, Uncle Brian, even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Each one some variation of, can we talk? Or just want to understand what's going on. Cassie had clearly gone on a PR tour, telling her version of the story, the cold-hearted brother who tricked his poor sister into homelessness. And then came the message that changed everything. From my mother. If you don't fix this, you're going to split the whole family in two. I hope you're proud. I stared at that message for a long time. Not let's talk. Not even an ounce of curiosity about why I'd gone silent. Just an accusation, straight from the queen herself, dropped like a gavel. And the thing that stung wasn't the message, it was the realization that she actually believed it. She really thought the weight of the entire family's unity rested on me bending again. On me making it all go away. Just like always. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake thinking about all the times I'd fixed things over the years, helping Cassie get out of that bad sublease when she bailed on rent halfway through the year. Wiring mom and dad money when their car insurance lapsed and they forgot. Driving 3 hours in a snowstorm to fix the busted heater in their cabin after they rented it out and didn't warn the guests. All the little things, the can you just favors that added up to years of rearranging my life around everyone else's comfort. I thought about how no one ever asked if I needed help. By the time morning came, I was done. Not angry, not emotional, just done. I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. I drafted one last message. No drama, no insults, just facts. I sent it to my parents, Cassie, and the few relatives who had texted to get my side of things. It read, "Hi everyone. I've taken some time to think about everything that's happened in the last few weeks. I want to clarify a few things and set expectations moving forward. I moved out of my old apartment in early April. No one consulted me about having Cassie move in. I was informed after the decision had already been made, and when I didn't comply, I was met with silence, guilt, and eventually public shaming. What happened at the apartment, Cassie showing up with boxes and being locked out, was not a prank. It was not punishment. It was the result of a family that has grown too comfortable treating me as a backup plan. Over the past 2 years alone, I have financially contributed in various ways that total over $9,000. I've never asked for repayment. I've never held it over anyone's head. But from this point forward, I am stepping back. This means I will not be covering any more family expenses. I will not be hosting, housing, or financially supporting Cassie. I will not be the emergency contact for issues I had no say in creating. This is not done in anger. This is done out of self-respect. I'm 29. I deserve a life of my own. You're welcome to reach out if you'd like to have an honest conversation, not a guilt trip, not a lecture, but a real dialogue. Otherwise, I wish you well. Eli." I turned off my phone after hitting send, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel the weight of my family pressing down on me. I didn't worry about how they'd spin it. I didn't even brace for the fallout. I just made breakfast. I watered my basil plant. I cleaned the apartment while listening to music, full volume, no interruptions. That week, the silence was deafening. No replies. No angry follow-ups. No apologies. Just nothing. It took 5 days before someone cracked. It was Aunt Lila. She sent a text that just said, "Saw your message. Proud of you. If they want a martyr, they can build a statue." I laughed harder than I expected to. Then I cried. Just a little. Eventually, the responses did come in. Mom sent a long email, full of vague sentimentality and no accountability. She talked about how family goes through hard times and how I had always been the strong one. I didn't reply. Dad called and left a voicemail that started with, "I just don't get what you're trying to prove," and ended with, "This isn't how we raised you." I deleted it. Cassie went quiet, surprisingly. No texts, no subtweets. Just silence. And that said more than any tantrum would have. Weeks passed. I started sleeping better, eating better. I went out with friends without that tightness in my chest, waiting for the next favor to derail my weekend. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes like it was a time bomb. Then one day, something strange happened. I got a letter in the mail. A real one. Handwritten. From Cassie. It was short. Just a few lines. "Eli, you made your point." Loud and clear. I didn't see it before, but I do now. I used you. We all did. I think I wanted a soft landing more than I wanted to grow up. That's not your fault. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just wanted to say, I get it. And I'm sorry. Cassie. I sat with the letter for a long time. I didn't frame it. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't even reply. But I didn't throw it out either. Because maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. Months have passed now. I see my parents less. I've stayed no contact with Cassie since the letter. Not out of spite, just space. The kind of space I never realized I was allowed to claim. Last week, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the leasing office at my old building. Apparently, someone had tried to use my name as a reference to rent a unit. They flagged it because the application looked suspicious. I asked who the applicant was. They told me it was Cassie. I paused for a second, then told them the truth. That's my sister. I wouldn't recommend using my name. And I hung up. That night, I made dinner. I played some jazz. I lit a candle and cracked open a new book. The apartment was quiet, still, mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it already had, and I had stepped out of the way.